everybody. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Get Ready. Today, I'm here with a good friend of mine. We're talking about a concept that he's written about in a book. But first, let me tell you a little bit about Evan Gregor.
Mhm.
So, Evan is also an EFT practitioner, although he also uses other techniques like guided imagery, meditation to facilitate changes for his clients. But the other really cool thing about Evan is he is a jazz bassist, has performed with all kinds of jazz legends, Grammy award-winning vocalists, has performed internationally. And I just find that pretty darn awesome. But we're not talking about that today. Maybe one day we'll have you back and have you actually jam and play some stuff for us. But today we are talking about this concept of the fact that people aren't a repair project. And so thanks for being here to talk about that.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. As you know, I'm a big fan, and not only in your tapping, but just sort of how you conduct yourself and your business. And having gotten to meet Brad in person, which is not always the case, he is the guy in the video. It's not a thing that you're putting on, and that's very refreshing.
All right, all right, all right. This is your interview. You
Okay,
already interviewed me for the podcast.
that's true.
So yeah, but we did have a very nice time in New York and with your lovely wife Maya and hanging out. But so this book that you wrote, You Are Not a Repair Project. It's a great way of looking at it because so often when we look at EFT, it's like, okay, I have a problem and I need to fix it. I need to get rid of this thing. And that's definitely an attitude that is not always comfortable, but also not necessarily beneficial. And so that's why you came up with this. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, it's a short ebook, and it was a challenge to make it short, to distill what I found was super relevant for me and what helped me with my own inner work actually be gentler, easier, and work better. So I know that's a big promise, but it's really not a new technique, but a shift in the perspective of all techniques, right? So my theory, hypothesis, is that every emotion in you, everything you feel, is ultimately serving you. It's protecting you. It's not random. It's certainly not because you are bad or wrong or defective. Even the ones that feel really, really bad, from their perspective, they serve a function. Now, unfortunately, the way we're often taught or conditioned is that something feels bad, or I'm experiencing a repeated emotion or pattern of behavior. It's because something is wrong with me. And that's deeply embedded in the culture and all sorts of stuff, but it's easy to perceive it that way. So regardless of the technique, no matter how good, and EFT is a very good one and scientifically sound even, you can be doing it from the concept of, okay, I'm feeling sad or I'm feeling angry. Anger is bad because we're taught that. So what's the tapping to get rid of the anger? And that's a logical conclusion, right? How do I get rid of this? But I call that like a repair mindset because the fundamental assumption is something in the machine is broken, right? The engine isn't working, so I'm experiencing this anger. EFT is the wrench or the hammer to fix it, right? And it will give you some results. That's one of the tricky parts, is it will still be effective. But the sort of antidote to this repair mindset, I just titled relationship mindset, which is the emphasis is on not the technique itself, but how am I relating to the emotion or the experience that's coming up for me? So anger comes up and the relationship to it is what's interesting. So if you are, anger is bad, I'm trying to tap it away, your relationship with this and the energy, I consider it, is I want to get rid of you. You are bad. I don't like you. And you can imagine, you can imagine how well that works for another human being. It's the same premise. And what's also super interesting about that is just like with other human beings, you can be saying nice things. You can learn a self-love type of technique. I'm going to send this emotion love. But your actual intention is, this is wrong. I'm using a self-love technique to fix it. So from a relationship standpoint is, okay, can I be curious about what this anger actually is? Why is it here? I'm giving it a name, anger, but something is happening inside me. Procrastination is an interesting one as an example, because I've never met anyone who said like, yeah, I'm a procrastinator and I love that and I want to procrastinate more. So of course you don't like the behavior, right? But the underlying assumption is I'm procrastinating because I am a procrastinator. There's something wrong with me.
Right.
And that's the mindset. The repair mindset doesn't give you a chance to even ask a question. But the question I'm kind of curious about is, well, what's actually happening inside me? And if you zero in on it, which is great because you can just do it yourself and test it, is part of me wants to do something and I have a natural motivation to create that website or start that business. And then something comes up and that feels uncomfortable, right? So this hand is, I want to do it. This hand is, I don't want to do it. And our natural assumption is this one is good and this one is bad.
Right.
We'll use EFT to try to get this one to go away. But to be curious, hey, why don't you want me to do this? Now that's literally a question you can ask it. Hey, why don't you want me to do this? That can take you down all sorts of roads. Like, oh, well, when you were 4 and you don't even remember this, you got your hopes up about something. And when you presented it and nothing happened, it was so soul crushing. That's something, this hand is saying, well, we don't want Brad to ever feel that amount of pain again. And so that framework now, oh, okay, now you can tap on those memories. You're really going to get somewhere. But it's in that perspective, the technique is agnostic. It doesn't matter what you're using. It's how you approach techniques. And so when I started looking at things this way, and it's obviously not a totally original idea or anything, it's just observing that framework. And there's methodologies that zero in specifically on that. But people that tap with Brad know that you often say, and I want to appreciate those parts of me that are trying to keep me safe. I'm like, that's that. That's why I mention you in it, because you don't talk about the fact that you do it. But I'd be curious to find out sometime if that was intuitive or if you studied that or something. But that is a thing that you do. You look at the tapping as talking to the part of you that does not feel safe.
The idea that self-sabotage is simply misguided self-love, and looking at, okay, there's that self-love behind it. But I like the way you frame it as relationship, because it creates that room for negotiation as opposed to just trying to push it away. I don't know if you know Andy Bryce, one of the EFT masters, and he said, if you have a problem and think it's a problem, now you have 2 problems. So it's that
That's
idea,
right. I remember that.
if we stop looking at it as a problem and we get curious, and also that when what you were just saying there about the procrastination, and when people just say I'm a procrastinator, and we just put a label on ourselves, then we just have already said that that's a bad thing that has to be, we may not be trying to get rid of it. It may be, I've made peace with the fact that I'm a procrastinator, but I acknowledge that it's a problem, as opposed to there's something else going on there. I find this with the word lazy. People are always saying, oh, but I'm just lazy. I'm lazy. I say, stop that. People are not lazy. We don't do things because the perceived benefit is not outweighing the perceived cost. And so we can, using your framework, have a relationship with that behavior and look at what is it that's going on here. Because when we just say, well, I'm just lazy, we break off all communication, and that relationship isn't there, and the problem's going to persist.
Yeah, endlessly, because there's no room for a resolution. It's just doing its job, and it doesn't perceive you as being lazy. It's I'm protecting you, or I'm making sure you don't feel the pain. So it doesn't perceive a problem with that.
It's like, lazy, what are you talking about? I'm the hero here.
Yes.
I have saved your butt from so many dangers that might not have happened, but because of my past behavior or past programming, these experiences that I might have misunderstood, I've determined were dangerous. And so I'm not being lazy about taking that action. I am being very proactive about avoiding danger.
Yeah, the way I like to think of the mechanism, which I put in that ebook, is like a car, and we're not pretending, we're not kidding ourselves, which I've gone down that road of too, of like, I'm a procrastinator and I love it, but I actually don't. Or I'm just going to say a nice thing in my mind, because that doesn't actually create any change. It's just another mental model. But if you think of a car, let's say the car won't go past 40 miles per hour. Now, that's not going to be fun or particularly useful. And it's a fact. So we're not denying your experience, that you're experiencing this procrastination and you don't enjoy it. But the difference is, if that car has a broken engine that won't go past 40, then yes, you need a hammer and a tool, and there might be something physically defective. In your case, it's not that. It's much more like you are an unbelievably sophisticated, Tesla 9 point whatever, and your very sophisticated computer is saying, no, 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 anything above 40 is not okay. And it has a reason for that. It's not just messing with you. It's like there was a past accident, or we saw an accident, or you're not safe above 40. And what is the way to actually go inside that computer? And that's what I think of this as. It's a literal way of interacting with that part of you, because similarly, as you know, like part of EFT is the exposure component, exposure to the fear. If the thing inside of you that's protecting you from something gets firsthand experience that that's no longer dangerous. It's actually okay. You are not the 8-year-old anymore. It's okay for you to go past 40 now, because it's kind of integrated and processed through. It will gladly let you go as fast as it now feels comfortable to do. But like you said, all of those other approaches sort of fail, because you can try to make peace with the fact that you're going 40, but you're going 40. There's something like intuitively not quite right about that. And it's also never been sufficient for me to just say, well, I'm 40 and I love myself, and cool, right? That's better than being angry at yourself. But usually unconsciously or somewhere back there, you are frustrated about it. So I don't want to pretend that there's not a problem, which in a relationship is a thing that people do. You can pretend for a while, you can pretend long enough that things are cool, but it's going to hit that moment where something needs to give. And we want to facilitate this conversation inside ourselves before it gives, basically.
Yeah. That there's that part of us that says, I might want to go more than 40. And recognizing that part of that relationship is recognizing that while it may not be ideal now, it was ideal at a certain point.
Oh yeah.
When I was young, I shouldn't have been going 40 miles an hour. It was really good to not have that. And one of the analogies I like to use with folks is with some of these old behaviors that are built up from the past, is like holding an adult's hand when you're crossing the street. It's a good plan when you're a little kid.
Yes.
To hold an adult's hand when you're going across the street. At a certain point, it becomes challenging. If that was a rule that was meant to be forever, many of us would still be standing on some street corner someplace going, hey, could you, somebody, please.
Yes.
So even looking at that thing of it was being able to see it, yeah, it was really beneficial, and it was for a particular time. And that relationship model allows us to have that more peaceful interaction, to look at and say, hey, no, this wasn't necessarily even a problem when it first started. It may have been the best thing possible. And now let's look at it.
More than once, I found it to be stunning when you find why it was doing what it was doing. It can be very emotional. There's always a reason it did that.
Yes, there's always a reason.
And that can be, it's not necessarily like it was just a good idea. It was like, oh my God, if that hadn't, that's why that formed, and that had to form the way it did, because I wouldn't have been able to handle that emotionally when I was 5 or 6. And there are things, again, that as an adult, you might look back on and say, oh, that wasn't that big a deal. You just got a bad grade, or someone just didn't respond to you in a positive way. But that can be absolutely crushing
in that
at a certain age.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about it is it remains in the shape of it was at the age it happened. If that's how I think about it. So it doesn't know that you're 40, 50, 60, whatever now. And you can't tell it that. And we've heard that, and I've said that in my own mind enough. Oh, I should be over this by now. I'm this old. I shouldn't still be doing this. But that doesn't operate in the dimension of how old I am or logic in that sense. It's simply, no, my job is to protect you. And until I talk to it directly and let it experience, it doesn't care how old I am. If it experiences a new container where it's safe to let you go faster, it will do that. And until then, you're just barking at it. You're just saying, well, do this. I should do this. And it's not even listening to that is what I find the most interesting. Because a lot of those conversations, they're literally just in our minds, right? Even again, that's why I like it as a framework model, because affirmations could work or not work depending on the context which you're using it. If I'm looking at a thing that thinks it's saving my life and I'm just saying the opposite at it, if I start thinking about that as a person in a relationship, like how useful would that be? And saying to your wife, like, I'm cleaning the house, I'm cleaning the house, I'm cleaning the house, and you're not cleaning it. Like nothing's happening, right? It's okay. What's actually going on here? Why do we need to be in the position we're in?
Yeah. That looking at the reason behind it, so finding the function of behavior, but coming at it without I just had the image of that is, going and looking for the function of behavior with a baseball bat. All right.
Yes, totally.
What's going on here? Because I know there's a problem. It's like, put down the bat.
And the interesting is it perceives the bat, even if you don't. It perceives the bat immediately.
Yeah.
So that's why it doesn't matter what technique you're using. Even if you're, and you've probably encountered this, where someone has learned the language. Right? It's like, so, I was trying to look at this part of me with love and compassion, ... but it didn't go away. So it knew the whole time that you were looking at it, you were using love and compassion as a framework to fix it, to make it go away. Oh, and actual love and compassion, I mean, I don't have kids, but you do, and it doesn't always look like you're just saying, hey, that's nice, that's nice, that's nice. It's no, what's actually happening here, and what's the conversation that we need to have. So to me, the idea of self-love is very little to do with just saying nice things in my mind. But okay, if something in me is in pain, am I in there going, suck it up, get over it? Am I using the bat to try to, knock away that anger and frustration? Or is self-love much grittier, like a real human love, where it's like, I love you, let's talk about this, let's figure out what's actually happening here? And it's not the easiest conversation sometimes, just like real conversations aren't. Just like the reason there's no tapping for, I'm going to do the tapping for the perfect marriage, or I'm just going to tap and visualize all my relationships being perfect, and then that would just be sufficient.
Oh, there's a tap for that. Haven't you seen that one? I have that on YouTube. Yeah, it's like
yeah.
Perfect marriage in 5 minutes or less.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good one. You got to do that one next week.
Yeah, lather, rinse, repeat as necessary.
Yeah, but I appreciate that you don't do that, and there is a lot of that, and I find it unfortunate, that there is a lot of, it's almost like you're hijacking the idea of self-love into sort of quick fix hacks and tricks, and here's a biohack to, it's like, come on, man, this is like deep programming that happened by a nervous system that's, very old, very deep, extremely wise, extremely intelligent, knows exactly what it's doing. If you're procrastinating, that's years of wisdom and intelligence.
Well, and it just hit me, this part of that is in our society, and ever more so in the information age, when we have things instantly, when we can buy something and have it there, within hours. Sometimes we have no more sense of delaying gratification. And so if self-love takes longer, that's a problem. Yes. So that's one of the problems that we need to, and so a lot of marketing is designed around the idea of, you're going to get this instantly. And the people putting out there might know, well, of course it's a lifelong process, but what you want to hear is this, because we have this notion of the fact that I don't feel totally self-loving 24/7, 365 is a
Mm-hmm.
problem that needs to be gotten rid of. And here's someone who comes along and tells me that in 5 minutes I can have that problem fixed, because I've now defined that I'm a repair project. If I'm not loving myself all the time, then that seems appealing, as opposed to recognizing this relationship with ourselves, this self-love relationship is, it's part of the process. It's part of what we're here for. We didn't come here to be formed and have everything be perfect from the get-go, because how boring would that be?
And that fits into the model as well. And part of what I conceptualize about it is when something is fixed, it's fixed, it's done. And that is also toxic to have as a representation of how you look at yourself. Let me just get rid of every limiting belief one by one, and then I'm done and I'm completed. I'm fixed now. And everything is just, I'm supposed to become this, super being. But when you look at it as a relationship, which it is, in my opinion, relationship doesn't end. You don't hit a point with your partner and go, okay, we just did it. We just achieved final relationship, and now we just like evaporate into a puff of smoke or something. It's ongoing as long as you're still here. And that's
We've just had the
why
best conversation. I think that we should probably quit while we're ahead.
that's it. That's the end. You've fixed the relationship.
That's it. We've now had the perfect relationship experience, and yeah, no.
It's so interesting though that internally it's easy to conceptualize it that way, that it should end. And that's why if I had a good day yesterday, hey, cool, I'm on the path, I must have healed. The next day things are going south, or you're having pain in your body, or a bill comes in that you didn't expect, and it's like, I guess I'm off the path. It's like, well, no, a relationship is dynamic, and every day is different. And the thing is, you're in it whether you want to be or not. You didn't sign up for it, and you can't really get out of it. So that's the beauty of, okay, well, let's start acknowledging more of what this is. And like I said, I just think it makes everything work better. It's not a technique, it is a framework.
Yeah.
It's a lens that you see techniques through.
Yeah. And it can even be exciting at times when it's like, well, I when we have that mindset of, I thought I fixed this, and now, this is something's uncomfortable in terms of this. I've even said this to folks sometimes. It's like, okay, so look at that and go, wow, things were really great, but this shows me that as great as things were, there's still something there that's holding me back. So it's like with the car, to go back and use your analogy, if now whatever was stopping it from going over 40 miles an hour, now it's going 50, and I may be saying, wow, that's really great, but I find, wow, I'm not getting where I want to go as fast as I want, or the other cars are going past, and I might be feeling bad now that I didn't fix it. It's like, no, that just means that there's still more, and you're capable of things getting even better. So having that relation, rather than having that fix it mindset of, okay, shoot, one more thing to fix, but instead it's like, oh, cool, it can get even better than it was. How awesome. So when those things that show up that look like problems, it's like, no, it's an invitation, or it's an opportunity. It's a little nudge of, things are pretty cool, right? But don't settle. Don't settle yet. Just like you're saying in a relationship, it's like, wow, things are so great between me and my partner. I wonder how much better it can get. And so if something shows up that is seemingly less than ideal, it's like, oh, there are still things, there is still growth, which is good, because at what age should we be done? And then the next however many years is just, all right, can't get any better than this. It's never
Right.
going to get any better than this. There's nothing better. I've already seen and done it all.
Right. And that is a good antidote for the, hey, I thought I already tapped on this. Right. From this framework, it's a little bit more like, hey, I already talked to my daughter yesterday. It's like, well, no, 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 it's a relationship. Like you have to do it again tomorrow, and tomorrow might be different. And a week from now, something in you real intense might come up. And, to go on what you were saying, more intense things could be coming up because you are now ready to handle them. So, as you know, the sometimes quote unquote worst days, worst months, whatever, represent a progress of sorts because you're now having this conversation. You're actually working with something. You're actually clearing more space for whatever really is kind of deeper in the hard drive to come out and say, okay, Brad's talking to us now. He's listening to us now. We've processed what's underneath that. His engine, his capacity is larger. We can process more in order to actually move to that next step, and that's organic again, as opposed to, okay, well, how do I clean the hard drive? What's all in there? Just bring it all up so I can hurry up and live. It's like, again, like hurry up and finish the relationship with my kids. It just doesn't make sense through that lens.
Yep. Everything, it's being something to be fixed, and even just saying, this is the adventure. It's not that this is a problem that's blocking my adventure. Figuring these things out, having that relationship and playing with it is the adventure.
I mean, could be a conversation for another time, but being a jazz musician for a living who accompanies other people, to me, that is life.
Yes.
It is literally in the moment. They did this. I can just pluck away and I would still work because people need a bass player. But the real thing is the nuance in the voice. This phrase got a little louder. This requires a little more intensity. Is she back phrasing on purpose? Is she pulling behind the beat, which means I need to make it more clear so that there's a contrast? This is like in the moment. This is a dynamic relationship between me and the drummer, me and the piano player, me and the vocalist. That is the magic. It's not like the equivalent would be now where you just put it in Pro Tools and it's done. We just made perfect music, and perfect music isn't that interesting because there isn't a relationship between the instruments responding to each other in these imperceivably. I know what's happening, she knows it's happening, but in the audience, it's just this effect. It's way too subtle to grasp. And that's what makes music interesting. And that's what makes inner work and facilitation interesting. That's why I you can feel your videos aren't just like, okay, scripted out, like let me just talk about this thing in a very rote way. It's like, well, let me connect to what this is and give a voice to it. It's, to me, it's improvisation, which is what I do.
Absolutely. No, I love that you brought that up because the the most brilliant jazz is those that improvisational part where it's that relationship between the musicians on stage, and it isn't, oh, here's a problem to be fixed, oh, this person
Right.
now went off on this. It's like, oh, cool, how do I work with that now? And when when you're really in sync and playing off each other, as opposed to, because some people would say, oh, well, now it's off of it's off of the written page, so now that's a problem. They're no longer playing the notes that were written out. It's like, no, that's not a problem.
Right. Right. And
It's not a problem to be fixed. It's a an opportunity to play with and create something that's, what, because when we, again, going back to the idea of when we think there's a problem to be fixed, we might be missing out. It's like, if that wasn't there, we might be missing out on so much.
right. And even if it is music that's written, or you're playing a classical piece that's 200 years old, classical musicians could play it in a kind of checked out, this is in my muscle memory, I can do that, and they could execute that and it would be fine. But there's the great ones have this relationship to what they're doing, even if it's not improvised, even if they've played it 300 times. And I mean, you've given like talks before. I haven't, but I'm assuming you have. And there's a certain amount of preparation. But even if you're kind of giving the same talk, there's a space that you're coming from. Are you just doing it from a rote space, or are you doing it from this place of real interconnection. And I feel like that's a useful framework, why I like this as a concept for people that work on themselves, which I can't imagine anyone watching your channel doesn't. That you can say it, well, I tapped, but really, what zone were you in? Were you kind of checked out? Were you like, well, I did this 4 times and it didn't do what I wanted it to do? Or am I using, I think of tapping as a way of sending calming signals to the nervous system to help facilitate this conversation.
Yep.
It makes the conversation go more smoothly. It's not a baseball bat, like you said. It is a mediator. It is like, hey, everyone, calm down. I'm not here to hurt you. So, this part of me that doesn't want me to do this, like, what's going on in there? This helps it not go, hey, what's going on in there?
Right.
Why are you still here? Why I tapped on you last week? Why aren't you gone?
Right. Which goes back to like my daughter. I talked to my daughter last week.
Yeah.
Why is
what's she still doing here? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because it makes me think about how, with my videos, sometimes people will say, if it's over 5 minutes long, it's too long. And it's like, with a conversation that you're going to have with somebody,
Exactly.
if we're going to say, okay, look, you seem like a nice person and I want to have a conversation with you, but if it takes more than 5 minutes, that's a problem.
Yes.
And it's, as though a conversation is a problem that needs to be solved in a matter of, and it's like, no. And we don't want it to go on forever because we have other people we want to converse with and other things that we want to do, but allowing ourselves to be there in that moment, it's like, I'm going to spend some time with this and playing with it and making it as painless as possible and not looking at it as a, I'm going to go in and I'm going to smash it with the baseball bat for 5 minutes. And hopefully within 5 minutes it's smashed.
Yes. Yeah.
But
Do not succumb to the algorithm. And someone would be giving you advice that you got to make all your tappings long enough to be a YouTube short because they're pushing shorts. And I think it is important. I mean, especially as a jazz musician. I mean, come on, who wants to listen to a 12-minute jazz tune? But that's what people will tell us. But look, I'm not going to stop doing it because I know that was what 15-year-old me needed to find his purpose in life. Yeah. And if they had all kind of dumbed it down, not that shorter music is dumb, I just mean it's not what they wanted to do.
Right.
They wanted to have that kind of conversation. And if they shut that off because seemingly more people want that, then you're doing a big disservice. And I think it is useful to be aware of there is a energy or a force, you could call it, that is constantly pushing us to make it shorter, faster dopamine, more a quicker hit. Yeah. How can I should be able to get a month's worth of EFT tapping in 1 minute now because we have, AI tapping that's going to go into your brain. And this is if you want something real, you have to have a real conversation, and you want something real no matter how shiny something short and quick might seem.
I want to really listen to a really great jazz piece with incredible improvisation, but I want it in 2 minutes because I have other things I do.
Yeah. Love Supreme was a little, yeah. Can you get this down to 15, Coltrane? Can you get this to a radio? I mean, if you are creating something for the radio, that is its own art form. It's great.
Yeah.
But no one wants only that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And there are different formats and different venues for different things. Obviously,
totally.
That's why, for folks who complain about my videos that are over 5 minutes, come to one of my live events where I might do a tapping round that's half an hour long. So
I am a small channel, but my most popular video by far is like 13 minutes or something. Yeah. And so, and when you think about it, that's not long. I mean, are you kidding?
No, but in our fast-paced society, yeah. It's like 13 minutes. I don't have 13 minutes to watch a video. So yeah, we're funny as human beings, but when we allow ourselves that the things, there are people who say, can you make a 5-minute video that'll just solve all the problems? It's like, what are you going to do for the rest of your life then?
I love that. Yeah. Again, I know we probably don't have time to get into it, but that concept of why Brad can't make a video just says, I'm not good enough. Because you know how you can boil most things down to that.
Yeah.
But there is a reason, because how it shows up in your specific way, right? So me tapping on I'm not good enough on a Brad video is good, but working with you one-on-one or getting more in tune with this on myself is where, yeah, but I'm not good enough. When I was on stage and I was lost in front of that person, the way that contracted in my body, what that did to my psychology in that moment, that decision, I'll never let myself be in this position again. I'll promise I'll play perfect. And now I'm paralyzed to get on stage, which, by the way, is obviously, I'm speaking from experience. The specific way it appears for you matters. That's why it's a relationship mindset.
Absolutely. And that's why with the relationship mindset, it allows us to look at those specifics. Right. Whereas if we have that repair mindset and it's antagonistic, and you're talking to that part, you're stopping me from getting this done. Yes, but no, I don't want any excuses.
Right.
This is that you're not to be heard from here. I'm telling you what you need to do. There's no relationship there. And so we miss out on it. And even if it's like, okay, well, I don't do that anymore, but I'm in a lot of pain and I'm struggling, and it's because we haven't really addressed.
Have you tried hustling harder?
Yeah.
Have you tried getting up at 5 and getting in your grind set and attacking your day? Maybe you got to get up at 4 and hit it a little harder. That'll do it. And I like some of that material, but you know why I'm saying that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's that hustle mentality in a lot of that, and it's allowing ourselves to, so rather than beating ourselves up when we don't get up at 5, going, let's talk about this and see.
Well, that's what's cool about it, is because when it's your own relationship internally, your own relationship, we could talk another time of why I'm often the only male identifying person on a lot of these EFT calls, right? Is because sometimes the idea of a self-relationship, it creates a certain image. But no, the relationship gets to be on your terms. Yeah. So talking to the part doesn't have to be like dainty and, it can sound like David Goggins or something if that's how he found it. That's how he found his thing. His way of getting in there is a very different voice. It might not be like, hey, I love you so much. And you might not feel comfortable saying that to yourself, but you might say like, hey man, what's going on in there? How you doing? Right. Like, it can have humor. It can have nuance. It's a real way of talking to yourself. It doesn't have to be flowery. It can, in fact, the more real it is, the more you're talking the way you actually talk and are, the more it's like, no, man, I'm just trying to help you. I'm just trying to help you out. Remember that time you got lost? Like, that really sucked. Oh yeah. Okay. I get it. That was brutal. I didn't even want to remember that. Like, to me, that's how the conversation sounds. It sounds a lot more like this. It's not necessarily, okay, now I'm going into my self-love zone, and because it's not really me. That's not how it appears to me. That's why you can't teach it in that direct way or scripted way.
Right. So yeah, it's a relationship, but it's not one kind of relationship. We have different relationships with different people. We talk to different people in different ways. So yeah, awesome, very, very helpful framework for us to look at this stuff, and just much less painful. Like, it's like, yes. So we can, rather than avoiding it, because we put off so many things that would really set us free, and when we can imagine that as a relationship and see it as, oh, this is going to be a really beneficial thing, help a lot of folks. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Oh, thanks so much for having me and giving me a space to talk about it with you. You're obviously a part of how I discovered this, so that's why you're mentioned in it.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.